Hey everybody, welcome back to our small business spotlight. My name is Dhruvi Harilal, and I'm here with my good friend Neil Wainright of Up Habit. Neil, how's it going, man?
It's great. Thanks for having me, Drew.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Neil's got a really cool startup that he started, shocker, and that we're going to talk about. But we're also going to talk about Neil's journey as a startup entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur. And but before we do that, I have a quick announcement for that's not relevant to me personally, but congratulations to Reddy and Krina for giving birth, because now they have two kids, which is awesome. And you guys are awesome. And I can't wait to meet Arya. So, all right. That being said, Neil, tell us about your story, man. How'd you get started in this world? And then tell us about Up Habit.
Well, I got started in the world the way we all do, but I decided very early on in my, as a young age, I wanted to be a software engineer. So from a very young age, I cared about computers and everything, went to school for engineering and software, and just started a 35-year plus career now in software. I started out writing code at big companies and doing network analysis, and kind of decided when I was 26, I needed to start a business. So I started my first business selling Apple computers, and ran it from age 26 till about 31. And that was my first of now 8 businesses. My seventh I sold. It was a B2B SaaS business with mobile apps that did expense management. I did that for about 15 years. I was the CEO and co-founder, and I sold it to a private equity about 5 years ago. Decided at that point that it was kind of really sucked that I lost all my connections with all my customers, because it was all buried in my old emails from when I sold the business. So I decided to build an app called Up Habit so that I could actually own and manage my relationships throughout my career and throughout my life. So kind of in a short story, that's what I'm about. I do volunteer quite a bit, mentoring and coaching startups, especially first-time founders, to kind of help them understand the realities of what it's like to really build a startup, and what a grind it can be at times, but how rewarding it can be as well.
That's awesome. And so, right along those lines, I mean, what do you see a lot of times with young startup entrepreneurs?
They're all super smart. They're very motivated to be successful. They have an optimistic mindset. You can't be a pessimist and be a startup founder, because you wouldn't survive probably a month. But what I see is, when I got started, it was a long time ago, and the pace of business and life was a lot slower back then. Now it just full bore, and it hits you really hard. So a lot of startup founders, I'll see a lot of anxiety. I'll see a lot of stress. I'll see a lot of sleepless nights, and just in their eyes, and how relaxed they look. I don't think I rarely see a startup founder that looks relaxed. Everybody's wound pretty tight. And I basically, talk to them and speak with them about what it's like to really be a startup founder, and the kind of challenges they're going to face, and to also tell them they're not alone, that it's really important that they have a network supporting them.
That's really powerful, man. And yeah, it's amazing to know that other people are going through what you're going through, and then you're not, like you said, you're not alone. I mean, I think that's any group of people, any community that's out there that's dealing with the challenges or problems, and you're not the only one dealing with that. Knowing that alone is really powerful.
Yeah, I talk a lot about making sure that startup founders have a network around them, because as you build a team of people, because you're the founder, the CEO, or the co-founder, everybody reports to you. So you can't really talk to people who are reporting to you about the challenges you have in growing the business, because you don't want to concern them, freak them out, or anything like this. So you're kind of isolated at the top in terms of who you can speak with. So I do spend a lot of time coaching people to talk to people like yourself and other advisors and mentors and people and peers, other people that are going through the same thing, so that they have a support network for themselves as they kind of go through this growth phase of their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks like yourself as well, mentors who've been there, right? Who can say, hey, I've been exactly where you are, like literally sitting in that same chair.
Oh
And
yeah, and still am, and
yeah,
still am. I sold a business. My last seventh one I sold for a good chunk of money 5 years ago, but I decided to start another one, and I'm back in the chair. I'm back, with long, early mornings, late nights, waking up at 3 a.m. to see what's going on my email, seeing if there's anything I need to respond to right away. And it's just a grind, and that I think is the title of our talk today. But it is a grind for all of you startup founders or wannabe startup founders out there, and it will always be a grind. As you know, when I grew from like a few employees to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40, 50 to 150 when I sold it, there's always challenges that new challenges you're faced with, and you have to do the best that you can. And it'll never change. The things that you'll be looking at and making decisions on, and probably making mistakes on, will be different. But it'll always be there as kind of a constant thing, and you have to be prepared for it, and you have to kind of embrace it. I kind of enjoy thinking fast and making decisions that I hope are correct.
Yeah, and it's all that's a great way to look at it too. It's like you got to think fast and think on your feet and just go with it, right? And then sometimes you're right, sometimes you'll be wrong, right? But ultimately, you got to be able to iterate, pivot, and keep moving.
The best way to learn is to make mistakes, right? We do that in school. We do it all the way through school. We get better at math. We get better at sciences. I never got better at sports, but I tried. It's important to carry that forward into your business and to know that you won't be perfect. And the other thing is, and it's really important, when you tell your future employees or your employees that it's okay to make mistakes, and that you actually encourage them to make mistakes because it means they're trying. Part of our philosophy is make new mistakes. And what that means is, make mistakes. We want you to be trying new things and pushing the envelope, but learn from them so you don't make the same mistake again. That would be bad, but go off and make a new mistake. So literally, it's one of the hashtags we use within the company is make new mistakes.
I love that. I think that's great, because that means the mistakes in the past are lessons, not just mistakes that just failures.
Well, and it's really like the team is really surprised the first time they make a mistake if someone's new, and we have a Slack channel for mistakes. We might post it in there, and then and we've done this a lot in the past. And then I'm the one cheering it. They think, oh, the boss is going to come down on me. I just screwed up. We shipped a bug and we shouldn't have shipped a bug or something. And I'm like, no, this is really good. We tried something. We made a mistake. Let's fix it and correct it. It's like having most challenges in business and most mistakes. It's like having a typo on a website. Just go into WordPress and fix the typo, and then nobody knows that you made the typo from that point on. It's not something to dwell upon other than to learn from.
Right. Absolutely. So on that vein, first of all, folks tuning in, thanks for joining us today. If you guys have questions for Neil about startup, about the grind, about anything about startups or entrepreneurship, please feel free to post in the chat. We'll get to your comments and questions as we can. But Neil, I'm curious about your mistakes. What are some mistakes that you made in your early years as a startup founder?
Well, there's this, I don't know if you've been to one of them. There's this group called F Up Nights. I won't say the whole word. And people go and they actually, founders go and they talk about their biggest screw up. And I got asked about 2 years ago to speak at one of those nights. And I told all my friends, hey, I've been invited to speak at the F Up night. And they all looked at me and said, Neil, which topic are you going to cover? Because I made so many of them. It was like, oh man, which one am I going to choose? And, I've made every mistake probably known to man when it comes to running a startup. But the bigger ones, it's probably around people. When you're building a company, you have to really, a founder goes through an incredible amount of stress and the 7/24 lifestyle with the business, but it is not something you should ever have on your employees or your team members, because they don't hold most of the equity. They didn't found it. It's not their passion and the thing that wakes them up at 3 a.m. For them, it's something really cool that they want to be part of, and you probably created a great environment for them and everything, but you don't want them to burn out. And that's one of the things I had to learn, is how to protect the team members. During COVID, I noticed that, about it was a year ago, about March 12th last year is when we actually kind of went virtual. And it was about 2 or 3 months later when I noticed everybody was talking about, work-life balance and how they ended up working late into the evenings a lot, just because they were working from home all the time. And at that point, I went, oh, that's a warning sign. Because if people work too much just on your team, you might think it's a good thing, but they're going to leave your company. They're going to quit. They're going to find something else because they lose that balance in their life, and then they think that there's another place that will be better for them that wouldn't put them in that state. It's not typically true, by the way, but it's something that will cause people to think about moving on. So what I did is we always had a morning stand up where, people, gather in the morning virtually and they talk about what they're going to work on the day. And we called it a cafe, a morning cafe. But it was a stand up. And what we decided to do is, or I decided to do, is implement an end of day après. And so we could talk about our successes during the day. We didn't talk about anything we didn't get to. We talked about our successes during the day. But it was my way to kind of create a delineation, even though everybody's at home and they might be within 10 feet of, where they sit on the couch and, watch TV or go for walks or out the front door. But I wanted to create this delineation between work and home that typically going in and out of the office is your delineation. But of course, when we're trapped inside with COVID, we don't have that way of kind of drawing the line between the two different parts of your life.
I love that. Yeah, because that's a great way to wind down, and kind of get off of the work day. I talk about something that I call the mindfulness commute, right? Where it's like basically whatever you create your own kind of thing that you do, right? Your own tradition, so to speak, your own thing, the process you go through that either winds you up to work and then winds you back down afterwards, even if you don't have a lot of space. Because some people are working out of studio apartments or, like very small spaces, depending on which city you live in. Right. And a lot of times there's not a lot of space to separate your work life from your home life. And so the only way to do that is mentally. And so that's great. I love that like process of like, let's talk about our successes today. And then it ends on a high note, right? It ends on a positive note.
And it really helped them because, I was seeing, we do 2-week retrospectives every 2 weeks, which means, we just talk about the things that worked or didn't work in the prior 2 weeks. And I was seeing that, that kind of working too much thing kind of kick in some of the retros that we ran. So we put in the cafe the après. And sure enough, in retro, that was actually went down as an issue for everybody. So they did find that it was a bit of balance. Now, for software engineers, of course, they might not start work till 10 or noon, but they work late. So for those guys, they would still time shift, but they still knew that I cared about them having that balance. Because again, they're not the founder. They're not going through the grind. They should not go through the grind the way I do. Sure, there's peak periods when you're putting in some extra hours, but there needs to be a healthy balance so that they don't burn out.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and that's something a lot of people don't necessarily think about, right? They think like, oh, we're all in this together, and you're not. Like you're the one who, as the owner, as the startup founder, you're the one who owns the equity. One, and two, it's your vision. It's your thing you got to execute on, right? They're there to help and support you, but you can't burn them out. You can't just put everything on them. Like they need to do everything, and because they're not invested as you are, right? They're not as invested in the idea as you are.
No, nobody's that crazy. Only the founders are that crazy. But it's something I've always loved to do. I mean, when I was younger and I'm in my 20s, in my first business, I would pull not one but 2 all-nighters a week. And then I think in my 30s, I kind of wound it down to 1 all-nighter a week, and now I'm down to I don't want to pull all-nighters, but today I woke up at 4 a.m, so I started work. So I'm still not that far off of it for someone who's 59 now. That's pretty good.
That's amazing, dude. But yeah, no. So tell us more about Up Habit. I mean, what you tell us where it came from. But tell us more about what it does and how folks can use it.
Well, it's an interesting. Hopefully it's an interesting story. I sold my business, my last one. It was a B2B SaaS business. It was expense management. If you know Concur and Expensify, we used to beat them all the time. I think it's still the best expense platform on the planet. And I sold it about 5 years ago. And as soon as I sold it and I exited the business, I realized that these 2,000 corporate clients I had, like Fitbit, CrossFit, Marketo, I didn't know who Slack was when I won them as a customer. I had this pattern of not knowing who my big important customers were before I won them. I just knew I wanted to do a good job because they seemed like a nice company, not realizing, how stellar they would become. And I realized when I sold the business that I lost all my relationships. Sure, I have 6,300 people on LinkedIn, but really, LinkedIn, there's nothing you can do in LinkedIn to stay in touch with people other than have a spreadsheet outside of LinkedIn. So I decided I wanted to build a personal CRM. So this is basically, for those of you that use CRMs in your business for sales, this is your own network. You own it. It's not part of the company's data, it's your data. But it means that I can now manage my relationships. So I can set reminders, I can make unlimited notes and search, full text search them. I can create tags and categorize my contacts. It integrates with my local address book, my local calendars, all my email accounts, my Google contacts. All of that stuff comes into one place where then I can kind of, manage my network, and it's always mine. It's just like LinkedIn, where you own your LinkedIn account, you own your UpHabit account, and you can take it forward through your career. Now, for a lot of companies too, they want to get UpHabit for their employees, because if a lot of the employees' job is networking and building relationships, then we're the ideal platform for that. We don't have, an overdue flashing red light thing when you miss a task or you miss a reminder. We just move the reminder from the day that you were going to do it to today. So we never have overdue reminders, because we don't think that that's, everybody's got enough things going on in their life. We don't want to be one of the ones that causes them anxiety. We just want to help them with their relationships.
That's awesome. So in terms of the potential folks who might be interested in this, it's pretty much anyone, right? I mean, whether you're networking, and I hate saying anyone because it just doesn't not really helpful, but for folks who are networking, who are out there trying to get connections for themselves, personal connections, it's a great option for them. But on the flip side, it's also great for companies who want their employees to be able to manage like things through a CRM that's not necessarily built for just sales. It's built for relationship management.
Well, the best salespeople are building relationships all the time, and there might not be a deal right in front of them. So most CRMs are all about, an opportunity. Well, let's manage the pipeline. Let's make sure we're sending them 22 emails a month and everything to win the business. But what happens when there's not a deal in front of you? That's a relationship you want to nurture and maintain, and that's what we're really good at. We have built an integration with Salesforce. It's kind of in beta. But it's our first attempt to actually give you the ability to push your contacts into a corporate CRM. But really, primarily, we're about people and their relationships, and it's a global thing. I talked to a guy from I think San Jose originally, who's now working in Nigeria, and I was training him in Nigeria 2 days ago. I've talked to someone from Singapore. I talked to a high school student in Germany that knew that relationships were so important to him in his life that as a high school student, he downloaded and paid for UpHabit. And it's only either 50 or 70 bucks a year, so it's not that expensive. But as a high school student, he decided to download and use UpHabit because he knew relationships would be important to him throughout his life. I wanted to buy stock in that kid if I could have done it, because if he's that smart with this, he's like the next Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates rolled into one.
Oh yeah, I mean that relationships are everything, right? I mean, especially as an entrepreneur, as a startup owner, it's about building that team around you, like you said earlier. It's about building your support network, whether that's actual employees or people around you in your community that you can talk with and bounce ideas off of and lean on.
And it's not about being perfect either.
Yeah.
Like you can lose touch with someone for a while, and you think, oh man, how could I ever reach out to them because it's been a year? And then you reach out to them, say, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh man, great that you reached out. I've been thinking about you too. These are the 22 things going on in my life. And you're like, oh, cool. You don't have to have an important, it's actually important not to have an urgent reason to reach out to someone. You want to keep your relationships nurtured. So when it is time for you to reach out and you say, hey, I got an issue, or I need an introduction, or I need some help, that it's not something where they haven't heard from you in 3 years.
Yeah, and to your point though, I mean, I think it comes down to that taking that step to say, hey, it's been a year. I'm sorry, I lost track or whatever. Just checking in and saying hey, I mean, people tend to like, oh, it's been too long, I can't reach out now. It's just gonna get longer.
When I first installed UpHabit, I guess about 2.5 years ago now, for my production use, because we launched about 2 years ago on the app stores, iOS, Android, Mac OS, web. When we launched on the app stores, there was this guy that showed up because of my local calendar integration. my local contacts integration. And his name is Adam. And he was almost my very first employee at the first big, massive company I used to work for, where he was a new grad and he was going to be, I was his team lead. I wasn't even his manager yet, because I quit to become CEO of my first business before I became his manager. And I reached out to him, and I hadn't talked to him in 15 years. And he immediately responded, because his email was his first name at his last name.com. So I knew it was probably still active. And I reached out to him after 15 years. We started chatting back and forth. My wife and I flew to Vancouver. We had lunch with him and his wife. It was delightful. And this is after 15 years. You know, a year, 2 years is nothing compared to that. And it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time I end up reaching out to an old connection that I haven't talked to in a while, it's never like, oh my God, you know, I don't want to talk to you, or just ignoring I mean, it's always like, oh dude, it's been a long time. Hey, let's catch up, or what are you up to? I think people, especially nowadays with the past year being what it was, people are looking for connections, right? They're looking to reignite their old connections, because they don't, you know, it's hard to have that in-person connection that we haven't had in the last year or so. So whatever connections we've had before that, reigniting them is probably the best thing to do, honestly.
Yeah, you know, I one small story for you. I went to engineering school. One of my classmates, his name was Scott, and I was trying to reach out to Scott for, I don't know, 5 years. I could never reach him. He was down in Palo Alto. I talked to his office and ended up talking to his assistant, and she'd always tell me he was in China. And I was like, I want to, you know, I'd love to stay in touch with Scott. I had no reason to stay in touch with Scott, other than he was one of my old classmates and he's a cool guy. So I finally got through to Scott, and I was in San Jose at a trade show, and he actually ended up being home or in the Palo Alto area. So I got to meet him, and we went for a drink. And I said, Scott, what's been going on with you? I haven't seen you for almost 15 years. He said, well, you know, I decided to start a venture capital firm, and one of our first investments that I led was this little Chinese startup called Alibaba. I'm like, Scott's retired now, but for a long time. Yeah. But you know, and actually, when I want to, you know, if I want to go fundraising or something, if I want to go to the Bay Area, he'll say, oh, I want to introduce you to 8 people. You know, like, you know, and this is a relationship. I drank a lot of beer with him in university. That was the only reason I want to stay in touch with him.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, you never know, right? People are different places in different times of their life, you know, and like when reaching out to reignite an old connection, you never know how that person might be able to just be that resource or be the connector that you might need in the whatever place you're in your life, you know,
or that you can really make an impact in their life.
Absolutely.
I had someone reach out to me. I bought a company in Philadelphia in my industry about 6 years ago, and this employee worked for me for about a year as part of the acquisition before I left. And she reached out to me out of the blue about a week ago and said, hey, Neil, this is what I'm doing. I'm now selling Salesforce consulting. I'm repping for a consulting firm that does a lot of Salesforce work. I said, oh, you know, this Cindy, this is great. So we got on a Zoom earlier this week, and I've now introduced her, I don't know, to maybe 5 different networking groups in the Philadelphia and New Jersey area. And she's just flooded with people that are delighted to connect with her, and I was able to help her. And I think that was amazing. It's made my week this week to be able to think that I could help someone like that be successful.
Yeah, no, and exactly. And you know, you never know when you can make a difference in someone else's life, or vice versa, or both at the same time. You might be able to create something amazing for the world, you know? That's why I love making connections. Like, I mean, the folks I've connected you with, you've been able to help them already. I know that for a fact. So, I mean, that's just fantastic, you know? And then being able to be that connector to make that happen for that person, it's a great feeling.
And the trick about being a super connector like you are is you give first. And you may never ask, but, you know, karma has a way of coming back towards you. Sometimes it's overt and sometimes it's not, but it does come back in a positive way to reflect on the work that you've done to help people. I mean, there's people in Philadelphia and the networking groups that I'm a part of now where I would do anything for them because they're just such awesome people.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the people we met in the meeting I met you at, actually, so, like that group is phenomenal. Best of the Best is a really great group. But yeah, so we're coming up on time, and I wanted to, give you a chance to share anything last. What's maybe one or two, or maybe even three big pieces of advice you have for the folks that they haven't already shared yet. But if folks are either thinking about starting a company or just starting, or new founders, what are some big advice that you have for them?
Well, number one, it will always be a grind. And it can be a lot of fun. Like you can have a blast doing it, and there's a lot of highs too, lows along the way. But one thing I wanted to stress is not all startups succeed, but the founders shouldn't go down with the ship. So don't get so wrapped up in the business that you can't separate it from you if the business is going to struggle and not survive. I've had businesses that don't succeed, and then the next business I start, 3 months later, 1 month later, a year later, are way more successful than the one that I toiled at that didn't work out. So just keep that piece of or part of you safe and sane, so that you can, if things don't work out, you'll still survive. Because honestly, if you look at any successful entrepreneur, you can even read about Elon Musk and how many times his businesses almost went bankrupt. And what happened with Apple, with Jobs, and everything. There's all these successful entrepreneurs have had a lot of failures and a lot of things that didn't work out before it worked out in a huge way for them. So don't give up hope, and certainly don't go down with the ship.
Love that. That's great. Awesome. Well, Neil, thanks so much, man. How do people get in touch with you? I know you have a calendar link. We'll put your calendar link into the description below, so folks can reach out to you directly. But other than that, is there an email address that you prefer people to reach out to you at?
Yeah, it's just Neil. My name's on the screen, but neil@uphabit.com. I mean, you can see Uphabit on the label too. My Calendly link is there. People can book it whenever they want. I'm happy. I coach probably 70 or mentor 70 startups a year through various programs. And I'm a strong believer in diversity and helping startups be successful. And that's what I put a fair amount of my not spare time into.
Awesome. Neil, thank you so much, man. And for those of you who want to reach out to Neil, please reach out to Neil if you have questions about the startup life, about the grind. It is absolutely a grind, but like you said, it can be really fun, and really, especially if it's something you enjoy doing, that you're passionate about. So thanks again, man. I really, really appreciate it. You have a wealth of knowledge to share, and I really appreciate you taking time to share it with me and the folks watching, both now and after the fact. For those of you who like the video, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, and share this video. And again, thanks so much, Neil.
It's my pleasure. Thanks very much, Drew. It's been great for you to do this. Thank you.
Thanks, man.